Hi, everybody, and welcome back to the Renewables Podcast. Thanks very much for coming back to join us for another thrilling episode of Everything Renewables. Mark, how are you doing?
I'm really good, mate. It's nice to be in t-shirts without the heating needed to be on.
Yeah.
It's a great effect when you're out in the sunshine on a roof as opposed to the frost.
Oh, it's so nice, isn't it? It's so nice, like having the lighter evenings and being able to push the guys harder to work later on a night and everything. You know, they can leave site at 7 p.m. and no problems. But no, I'm joking, of course. But yeah, it is nice to have your evenings and to be able to kind of, do things on an evening without it being really horrible and wet. And yeah.
Everyone's just in a better mood at work as well. Even Nathan was in a good mood yesterday because he never does reels, and he did a reel on somebody going under a solar panel to connect an optimizer.
I saw it.
It's like, he never posts anything, so he must be in a good mood, and that's the sunshine in full effect.
No, that's good.
We do need to remember to talk about our sponsors and the installer show. We say this pre every recording. We need to remember to say this, and we get into the chat and forget. So we're doing it early on here. And just to say, our supporters at Proteus, absolute legends, and they have got some cool new products. There's the Type D RCBOs now in their range. They've had the Bs and Cs for quite a while. The Ds just launched. Obviously, they're more rare that you're going to be using those, but if you're installing motor circuits or you've got some big banks of lighting circuits maybe where you need that coverage for your inrush currents, they are useful to have in the range. And Sam's got a B version there, but the same sort of size and scope.
They are, and the B types. I was just looking at the size of that. That's basically like the size of an MCB now, and bidirectional Type A. Just they are really, really good, and I'm not just saying that because we're sponsored by them. They're fantastic.
Now you've adopted installing them into your business, and we've been fitting them for a good old while. And as you say, it's just the range. There's the Type B RCBOs that we've mentioned on other versions of the podcast, but they do also have the 4-pole 3-module RCBOs, which are really useful if you're fitting EV chargers on 3-phase systems. Before, you'd usually have to have a separate enclosure for your RCD or a bespoke board that Proteus used to do with a little top bit that you could put your RCDs in. Now you don't need to do any of that. It just goes into the spine board, really simple and straightforward. They're not that expensive either in the grand schemes of 3-phase RCD protection. And they've just got a massive range of gear. Go and check them out if you've not seen it already. They're in cities everywhere.
It's such a good point because cities are everywhere, which means if you're ever short of anything, you can guarantee that you'll either be able to get it that day or you can order online and get it the following day. It's unbelievable.
It is. I was short of some brass screws for conduit boxes. I'd left them in a tray in a loft somewhere probably, and I was like, what am I going to do? Straight on the internet to cities down there, and they had thousands in stock, and it's problem solved, isn't it? So I think that's the default approach for lots of us out there when you're missing something.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially when you're working nationwide.
Yeah.
It's very tricky.
And then we've got the installer show as well, and we're part of that this year. That's something that we're really excited about, but they are helping us out with the space there, and we do want to talk about the actual event, and hopefully some of you guys and girls will go and sign up. There'll be a link in the description wherever you're watching or listening to this to go off, because you have to register if you want to attend. It is free because it's at the NEC. You need a pass. It's a restricted secure area. If you want to get in the show, you're going to need one. So make sure you go off and do that. We'll be there on our stand. We've got a few exciting little things that we're plotting and planning, but more widely, there is so many brands and industry bodies there, from plumbing, electrical, even down to brickies and gardening. It is the installer show for all of construction.
Yeah, and I think, are we near Milwaukee or something like that as well?
We are. Hopefully get some freebies. We'll get there early in the morning and we'll raid their stall before.
See, I'm a DeWalt man, but, I'm not going to hold that against them. But no, there's such a wide range of stuff there that it'll be so interesting. Hopefully we have a bit of time to look around ourselves as well. But I'm really excited to have the good conversation with people that watch this, introduce new people to what we do here at the Renewables Podcast, and probably pick up some more ideas for some more episodes as well, because there's so much to talk about in renewables, and I love having this conversation.
That tends to be what happens, doesn't it? We spill into other areas of chat from speaking with people at these shows. And we're going to have some of our own merch there as well when we're running our little sessions. We still yet to fully define what they are going to be. But if you want a T-shirt like Sam's modelling over there, we'll be passing a few of those out, along with mugs and books and pens and all the rest of that stuff.
Yeah, it'd be good. Yeah, well, it's been another busy week in solar, and one thing that I'd posted out last week was all about the feed-in tariff and changes to an existing feed-in tariff system, because we're both coming across it all the time now, aren't we? Where a customer's been sold the dream of a 16-panel, 3.68 kilowatt solar PV system, and either something breaks or they want more power adding. We're kind of at that stage now where people are really looking at it thinking, I could do with some more solar. So this episode is all about, or initially about, can you alter a feed-in tariff registered system? I'd put something out on my YouTube and it had some really good questions. And so I thought we'd maybe cover it in a longer form discussion and share experiences.
It's a great topic, and it's one I know not very much about, because we get consumers asking us, and I'm always like, as far as I know, you can do maintenance on an existing system, but beyond that, it gets a bit tricky, because that's just kind of what I'd heard on the grapevine, and it turns out from watching your video last week that that's maybe not the case.
Yeah, I think definitely the trickiness of it doesn't completely disappear. However, that's usually, from my experience, because the energy providers don't know the rules themselves. Because, to be honest, the mood out there around feed-in tariff registered systems are that as soon as you've got them, don't even go near them. Like, if you literally sneeze on that system, then you're losing your feed-in tariff. And we had the situation a while back where a customer said, I need to change my feed-in tariff registered system because my roof is knackered. We didn't fit the solar PV, probably shouldn't have been fitted onto a roof of that state. But we'd installed them a battery, and they said, could you help me please get a new solar PV system in? We want a nice in-roof system to match the nice aesthetic of the property, but we don't want to, lose our feed-in tariff registered tariff because it's paying us £1,000 a year or something like that.
Why would you want to ever affect risking that?
Yeah, and it did. There was a few beads of sweat in the office when we were kind of trying to work out how we do this, because we didn't want to have to pay £1,000 a year because we'd put that under at risk. So that drove us down a rabbit hole a little bit of trying to work out, well, what are the actual rules around having a feed-in tariff registered system, and when you have to change that. Because I don't know if you've encountered it yet, Matt, but panels fail on them systems, and you're not finding a 250 watt panel or a 220 watt panel, whatever it is, very easily nowadays, apart from maybe on eBay.
That's it, isn't it? And the inverters as well. I mean, we've had a couple with inverter failures we've helped consumers out with, and that was, again, being very nervous, telling them to contact the feed-in tariff provider and make sure you get agreement for all of that. But so far, we've not gone into the realms of adjusting any panel layouts, but we have got an inquiry at the minute that we're speaking about pre-recording where the customer wants to do that. They want to change the entire array because they just don't like the look of the panels. This is someone who's very wealthy with a big fancy house, and they'd quite like to have all black solar panels like everyone else has got. Yeah. So that led me to start thinking, can we actually do anything about this? Unfortunately, your video popped up, which was really good. It's actually helping other installers as well as marketing your own business. So credit to you for producing it.
Well, it was a situation. I'm trying to look at when the email was, but it was a situation that happened in 2023. So I maybe should have put it out sooner than that. But I was prompted to put it out because I'd had a conversation with another prospective customer about it, and I thought it's probably about time we actually had an open discussion about this. And I put on the video that I'm happy to send this email out to other installers to kind of give them kind of some clout when they're speaking to, British Gas, Eon, whoever it is that actually pays the customer the tariff. They're the ones that need convincing. So I suppose it might be a good time to kind of, for people watching this that maybe don't know about the feed-in tariff, give a real quick overview as to what the feed-in tariff or FIT was, and how it was this golden goose back in the day. Because we speak about it a lot, but we maybe take it for granted that everyone knows about it.
Yeah, so, I mean, this is it. I didn't know a lot about it until getting into renewables. You hear the term, but you don't understand that it's like what you're actually generating. It's not what you're selling even back to the grid, which is just insane when you think of the setup that exists today.
Yeah.
And this customer we've got, I think they had their system installed 2008, maybe 10. So they've had it in over 15 years and they're on 50, 60 pence of every unit running through that system,
Yeah.
which is just amazing.
Yeah, it is. And firstly, like any kind of government push scheme, the name of it was rubbish. So feed-in tariff. So that's if you ever hear anybody talking about the FIT, it's the feed-in tariff. So that indicates to a lot of people, quite rightly, that it's what you get paid for any power you send back to the grid. I remember fitting these jobs when I was employed, and speaking to the customer, and they said, well, how do they know how much to pay me? Because how do they know how much I'm sending back? And I had to explain to them, no, you will get paid whether or not you send any back. You will get paid the same amount. It's just what you generate. So if your system generates 4,000 kilowatt hours a year, then you will get that tariff. So whatever it was when they were signing up, I think when it really first kicked off, it was about 43 pence. You'll get paid 43 pence for every single kilowatt hour you generate, no matter if you use that kilowatt hour or you send it back, you'll get that 43 pence. And that was tracked with inflation. So it's now, like you said, we on one of the YouTube videos I put out, we had an installer say they've got a customer that's on 70 pence per kilowatt hour. And that is crazy because that was guaranteed at the start for 25 years.
Yeah.
It then dropped to 20 years when it hit around 13 pence, 14 pence, I think, something like that. I'm sure someone will correct me if I've got that wrong. But that length of time, and obviously with inflation going where it was, that's just made it this unbelievable pot of money that people can have. People are spending a lot of money for a fairly basic system as we look at it now. You know, they'll maybe spending 15 grand on a 3.68 kilowatt system, and even my prices aren't that high. So you'd be hard pressed to spend that on a system nowadays for that size. But the yield you can get back off it is unbelievable. And the other part of that is about the deemed export. So back in those days, there was no real export smart meters. So what they said was, okay, you can have the 43 pence for every kilowatt hour you generate, but it's obviously not fair that if you send any power back, that we're getting that effectively for free. So we will pay you an extra 4p-ish, 4 pence on top of your 43 pence, whatever your feed-in tariff was, for 50% of whatever you generate. So for half of whatever you generate, no matter if you use it, you store it now in a battery, whatever, you will get an extra 4 to 5 pence for that kilowatt for that kilowatt hour. So it's just unbelievable. So for that 4,000 kilowatt hours you generate a year, you'll get 4,000 times 43 pence, which maths isn't that good, plus 2,000 kilowatt hours at 4p as well. Plus, if you use it,
even better, isn't it?
Even better.
It's like, this is the thing. This customer I'm speaking to at the minute, he's into the last 5 years, I think, of what his feed-in tariff is.
Yeah.
And it's not like he needs that money. He's had his return on investment already. But for him, it's the principle of it that at the time it was very expensive when he got it. He was an early adopter into it all, and he wants to maximise the return from that over the fullness of the time of his kind of install, which, I get. And there's also kind of the recyclability. If you're taking these panels off, they're maybe 15, 17 years old now. So they're getting towards the time frame where supposedly manufacturers' warranties expire and these things might need replacing. So he's mindful of that as well. But ultimately, he wants a better looking system, and he wants to grow that system as his consumption over the intervening period has grown substantially. He's got an SOS heat pump now, electric vehicles, and it's all about trying to make that change. And rather than use other roofs, there's a potential we're going to be doing that anyway, but change that particular one. I don't think that's going to be uncommon. I think there'll be a lot of people now who were those early adopters, perhaps more wealthy individuals at that time, who are looking to upgrade their systems and totally change them over the next 5-10 years. So I think it's going to become more of a common theme as the feed-in tariff payments end. But in this little window we are now is where it's complicated for people who want to make that switch. And from what you found out, they absolutely can. There's just a few kind of caveats and rules around what they're going to generate going forward, is my understanding. It's not that you can put this bigger array on that might double your output and still get paid for all of that. you can do it, but there's constraints, isn't there? I think.
Yeah, there is. Obviously, what they want to protect themselves from is you adding an extra 2 kilowatt panels. Putting a modern 3.68 kilowatt inverter in. So you've not breached the size on the agreement, but you've obviously modern inverters now can oversize quite a decent chunk. So meaning that you're able to generate more kilowatt hours. You're not able to generate more than 3.68 at peak, but you can generate more kilowatt hours over the course of that year, and therefore all feed that all the way back through your feeding tariff meter, meaning you're generating more money because there's more units going through that meter, that generation meter. So what they're saying is that yes, you can change the system, so you can repair it, you can even extend it, and I'll read the excerpt out of the document. But you're not allowed to be paid any more than the original agreement was for the capacity that you originally signed up with, and I think that's totally fair.
I do, and I think consumers accept that as well. They're not trying to get the cake and eat it on that front. They just want to kind of get some more of this modern tech and grow their systems as their electrical consumption's grown, whilst retaining what they'd originally agreed. And I think while you're in that place, it is fair. It's fair for the taxpayers and governments at the time who set these policies to try and encourage solar PV. It's fair for the customers, and it's fair for the installers as well. I think that's a good balance and place to be. The only other real aspect of it is if we're taking working equipment away, even if the panel efficiency is well under what the new ones would be, there's that kind of argument and what you do about that. In this particular case, the customer we've got wants to actually reuse those panels on a ground mount system that's a bit more out of sight and still put them to use within this new bigger install that we're currently setting out plans to go and deliver.
Yeah. Well, they're really interesting around the panels is a quite an interesting side topic. And Waxman Energy, Sarah, who came on, they're one of the wholesalers that have signed up to this, where you can actually contact them to send old panels back, and they then arrange the recycling of those panels, even if the panels didn't come from them originally. I think you have to have a minimum amount, so they're not just coming to collect one or what have you. But we've got a stack here that we're just waiting to send off, and they're a mixture of damaged panels, older panels that have been removed, all these sorts of things, and there's a lot in the sort of social sphere of kind of what do we do with all these older systems as they get to end of life, because most of these older panels, like when I was first installing panels, they were like a 10-15 year warranty. Like the panels we fit are around 30-year warranty now, so it's like doubled. Yeah. And it's that thing of, well, the feed-in tariff was 20 or 25 years, but actually a lot of the panel warranties, there was some, but a lot of the panel warranties weren't up to that anyway. So it was inevitable that there's going to have to be changes, because the panels were probably going to get changed within that sort of 20-25 year period that the feed-in tariff you were signed up with for. So something was going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, we've been out to look at a few older systems that have been installed well, but the panel seals have failed. They've let moisture in amongst the actual underside, like delaminate. Don't know quite what's going on with them, but that's happened. And obviously, you don't want to leave those things in service, even if they are generating. That's a tricky one. And then recycling that, like you say, it's really important that industry gets that sorted out. And we've had another delivery again this week where a panel came smashed. So these are things where they're just in transit and they're naturally getting damaged, and you want to be able to put them back in where they're going to be ground down or whatever they do, and then reused. And whilst we've got that, I think swapping these older panels out makes a lot of sense, as long as the consumers are getting their return on investment. We're not just wasting stuff, chucking it in landfill. I think at that level it's all right, which is, like you say, it's a side topic to the feed-in tariff aspect. And I don't know if you're seeing this in your business, but a lot of people who are wanting to grow these systems, they're looking more towards kind of winter and covering off as much consumption as they can. They're lucky enough to have large roof spaces, and they're wanting to do that. But then you kind of have some other troubles in the summer because of those size of arrays that we can maybe get to later on in the conversation. But I think it's important maybe to set out what it actually said in that email before we take the conversation any further.
Yeah. Well, so to give you a bit of a background, so I was hitting a bit of a dead end with, I can't remember, let's just say I think it was Eon. think it was Eon, who was the customer's feed-in tariff provider. So they're the ones that basically get the money to pass on to their feed-in tariff registered customers. Basically, so it's not Eon's money necessarily; they claim the money back, but they are the body that basically is the route to giving that money to the end users. So that was the paperwork that had been filled out when the customer got that. So I wasn't getting anywhere with Eon, mostly because a lot of these companies now have like a skeleton staff because no one's registering new systems. They're only there really to take meter readings and things. So it's very challenging actually to find anybody in these energy companies that actually knows about the feed-in tariff because, a lot of them are, are younger people that are probably not, I feel really old saying that, but are younger people that maybe weren't involved with anything like that. So they're just there to take the meter readings. So actually to get through to someone that knows the background of the feed-in tariff and what you can do is the first challenge. And that's where I was banging my head against the wall. And so I went to Ofgem, which is obviously kind of the governing body of the energy providers and all of that, and asked them about what the rules are. And you can find this stuff online as well as to the rules, but like anything, it's very, very lengthy. So this gentleman called Rory, who might end up getting a bollocking from his boss, basically sent me an extract from the rules. So I'll read sort of parts of this, but if anyone wants this email, just reach out. I'm trying to work out how I can just give people a link to it to download it, which I'm sure there's an easy way to do that. But let me know if you want this email. But it says, you may repair or replace some or all of the equipment without affecting the accreditation of your installation, provided that the installation continues to meet the scheme rules. These include that the maximum capacity of 5 megawatts is not exceeded. The accredited installation continues to generate electricity from the same eligible technology, so you can't swap it from solar to wind or something like that. The accredited installation is not decommissioned or relocated. I'll mention about the decommissioned in a minute. So it's not moved to a different property, so you've not taken it with you and still expect to get the feed-in tariff. You may replace generating equipment with equipment that has formerly formed part of an installation previously accredited in the feed-in tariff or renewables obligation schemes. I'll just go past some of these bits because these bits aren't as relevant. It's not relevant. There's a lot of bump on this, and if you get this email from me, you'll
we
know
should
what I
we
mean.
should set up the website so we can actually put this as a
Yeah,
PDF
we should
on
do.
there.
We should do. Yeah, in that extra day we get a week. Yeah, exactly. There's a lot we can do, and definitely I think that's a good idea for us going on in the future. Try and do something like that. So this next bit is kind of the crucial bit. Where an installation is extended, So where an installation is extended, it will only be able to receive fit payments in respect of electricity produced by the originally accredited capacity. No fit payments, either generation or export, can be received in respect of any additional capacity not accredited as an extension. So previously, this next bit refers to an extension, a process which is unavailable to extensions commissioned after the 15th of January. So previously you could apply for an extension to your feed-in tariff system and get paid for that extension. But obviously that ended in 2016, so that's not going to be relevant now. Where both the original installation and the additional capacity share the same generation and/or export meters, the meter readings have to be prorated to achieve this. The installation will keep its existing feed-in tariff regardless of any changes in capacity. So basically, regardless of the change in capacity, you will keep that original feed-in tariff registered system. It's basically saying you have to notify them of any changes.
Bless you.
Sorry, I was holding that back. So any changes you have to notify them of it, obviously. But as long as you do it, and it is a fight, because it was a fight with Eon even with this document, But this document gave me a bit of clout to go, well, this is what Ofgem have said. So you either comply to it or or you're going against the Ofgem rules, and they obviously went with it in the end. It is still at the discretion of Ofgem. Basically, say it is still at the discretion of the provider. So in this case, Eon. They can't make Eon do it because it's Eon's decision whether or not they let that money through the system. So what I recommend to people, and this is what I've done in the past, is I get all of this agreed. It might be obvious to say, but I get all of this agreed well before the install takes place, well before you've agreed anything with the customer. And if you can get the customer to do it, great, it's on them. But a lot of customers don't know how to do all this stuff, and they kind of see you as a company of basically taking this on for them. It's an extra layer of the sales thing, I suppose, but it's one of the things where get this in an email, get it in writing before you touch that feed-in tariff register system. Because, like for me on this job, I didn't want to be liable for that alteration and them losing their feed-in tariff.
100%. You don't want to be the person sending them a check for 300 quid every quarter because you ruined their feed-in tariff system. We're in this game to make money, not be spending it.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
Absolutely, mate.
Yeah, so that's what we do now. We get an email from the customer saying that they want to alter their feed-in tariff register system. We get an email, if we can, from the feed-in tariff provider to say that they're happy for us to do the work that we plan to do. And the background to this is we were only extending the system by 50 watts because we like to use the Viridian system, and we couldn't get a system to match the 4 kilowatt output. So we were only extended by 50 watts, so that's what it seems strange that we had to put these horrible blue panels back on just for 50 watts difference. So that's what really pushed us to go down this road, and I'm glad it did.
Yeah, I mean, it's great information and experience that you've had the hard way, and that now other installers can hopefully use a bit more easily. And it does make sense, doesn't it? It really does, because if you go into the trouble of swapping out a system and there's a little bit of extra capacity, then you should just be able to get that sorted without too much hassle.
Yeah.
For 50 watts, you'd think it'd be like shrug of the shoulders and crack on, mate. But you're dead right, Sam, to say to people, get this in writing, get your ducks in a row, because you do not want that to become your problem. When somebody comes out to read a meter sometime and they're like, those panels look a bit newer than 17 years old, and all of a sudden questions get asked, and those letters get sent to your doormat. It's like, no, you don't want that problem.
You don't, and I don't know if poor Rory's been sacked now or not, but I hope not, because he was a really good guy. And you're right, and I think one of the issues with renewables is that it's obviously always changing, so it's very hard to keep on top of what the actual facts are of this stuff. And I'm guilty of it. I'm not coming at this as some kind of from some position of kind of like above everyone else. Like, I take what other people say literally as well, and you get into that focus of like, well, this is what you can't change a feed-in tariff register system. That's what the last 20 people, other installers that I've spoken to, have said. But actually, you get into the weeds of what the actual rules are, and you find actually that you can. And so that prompted me that when I'm looking at these sorts of things in the future, of going back to, yes, this is what everyone says, but what's written down? What are the actual rules? Because people are so time poor that it's so easy to take what people say as the rules, that actually reading the rules can be, long, it can be more drawn out, but it might actually give you a completely different opinion, which then means that you're able to secure that extra job that everyone else has said that you can't do. You know, so it really does make a difference to go back to ground zero and really work out what the rules are.
It is that time thing. I mean, there's so much to know, from regs to products to sales processes to dealing with design software, and you cannot be on top of every single part of that. Yeah. Even as a business, regardless of just an individual, it's quite difficult in this sector. So you will have gaps in your knowledge with whatever. There's stuff we won't know right now that we don't even know we don't know.
Yeah.
And it's like these things just crop up through normal conversation. And I think that's why stuff like what you do on your socials and other people as well who are out there in the renewables industry, and maybe even the little podcast we've got going here as well, is really useful just to try and have that mind hive and reference it back to the underpinning part of that knowledge. It's not just, well, I've been doing it 20 years and this is just what I think.
Yeah.
I've gone to Ofgem. This is what they've said.
Yeah.
That's the process. And that could be around that topic or anything else. I think that's really important that we do that to try and make the industry better as a whole for everyone in it.
Yeah, absolutely. And just having the conversation that is against what everyone potentially has as their perceived, idea as to how we actually do this sort of stuff. It's like, well, 'cause you don't know how deep that kind of, it's not a lie, it's not like that vicious, but how deep that kind of lie goes even within the energy companies. If they're aware of that they can accept people extending the system, there just has to be a calculation done to offset the additional generation that property has now got. So you just don't know how far that goes into the ecosystem of actually your customer being paid for that. And that was probably what caused me a lot of aggro when I was trying to do this, was that a lot of the people I spoke to, because I've got, this obviously isn't the only email, I found all the emails whilst I was searching for this, all the emails from E.ON, gave me like PTSD when I was looking through it, but all the emails from E.ON saying basically you cannot do this. And then eventually I got to the one where it said, yeah, we're happy for you to do this. And it's hunting that out. And even after I'd done it, I was terrified that, next time I actually emailed the customer a few months later to say, have you sent another meter reading? Has it all come back all right? And they said, yep, it's all gone through fine. So I was like, oh, goodness for that. Because I was worried that, in the next quarter, they would come back and say, yeah, they've basically said that I can't submit this reading. And then that would cause me even more aggro. But it was all fine. And so I think it's just about doing your research and thinking outside of what you're told all the time, because I'm so guilty of that.
Oh, we all are. It's that time poor side of things as well that you referenced before.
Yeah.
And I imagine that the staff at E.ON are the same. Like you said, they're probably on a skeleton crew now looking after all of that. And with all the smart meter rolling out and the other renewables going on the system, EV chargers flying in everywhere, they probably are just as busy as we are, and you don't have that knowledge, and it's easier to just say to someone, no, because that problem then goes away, doesn't it?
Yeah.
You've had to fight and argue that case. And saying about the website and stuff for the renewables podcast, we are hoping to start developing those kind of things, but it is just time again, because me and Sam both busy in our day jobs, got a lot going on, and hopefully as this kind of grows and develops, we can have a bit more time allocated towards it to make it more of a resource in those places as well. And if you aren't aware, we're going to be at the Installer Show, which is the 24th to the 26th of June, and they're kindly helping us out with some space there. We're taking some merch along. You'll see Sam sat wearing some of it, so we're going to have some nice t-shirts to give out alongside some of the little events, or whatever we're going to call them, on our own little area. And we've also got books that may look like this. We're currently finalising exactly what we are going to be bringing. So if you want to come along and see us, there'll be a link in the description wherever you're watching this to go off and register on the Installer website, because you do need to register first. It's free, but they need to know you come in, so you get your pass and you can get in the door. Yeah,
it's a fantastic event, and I'm really looking forward to having our own little home there, because we went there and did. You were on a stand, weren't you? You were doing some catwalking, weren't you? With some bits. But I went around and did a lot of interviews with manufacturers and things like that. And the scale of that show is unbelievable. And it's a really good show for both the electrical and the plumbing and heating side. There's heat pump stuff there. There's inverters. There's panels. There's all sorts of different things. There's loads of stuff there, and I'm really happy, and a really massive shout out to Installer Show for allowing us to have our own little space there, to have a little hub where we can have a few people in and actually have in-depth conversations over maybe 10-15 minutes about a certain topic. We're hoping to produce some sort of like a little itinerary so that people can come during a certain time period and go, this is when this person's coming on, I really want to ask them a question, and kind of just have the chat. The podcast is about us having a chat, but also everybody that we have as a guest, everyone that watches. We're very much driven by the people that watch and people that are talking to us privately or on the comments about topics that they want us to cover. And so that is kind of an in-person version of that, where we want to bring those people into the conversation face to face and ask MCS something or whoever. So we're trying to finalise who's going to come. We've had a lot of people say that they will come and do a conversation. We just need to pin them down.
Got one slot booked with Proteus. Pete's got his slot booked.
Yeah.
Probably because he realised that's when we might be cracking the beers open. So.
Yes, we've got some beers there as well. So we've got merch to give away. We've got these conversations to have, and we're there to basically just have a good laugh with everybody and sort of chew the fat about renewables, really.
Yeah, get the podcast in the face of the plumbers because they're getting quite upset at us taking their show over. So we might as well do it in style with a stand space. Coming back to the topic, the reason I was kind of interested in that is this system is growing, and there's another element there of an issue. Panel prices are driving it. This isn't the only job we've got like that. There's a few that aren't fit systems, some new build, where consumers have moved into houses, they've got 4 panels on the roof, it's next to no good, they want to make it bigger. They've seen the price of panels, they're trying to get extra winter generation, size their inverters to cover heat pumps and things, and it can get really complex when the DNO say you can only send 6 kilowatts of that back to the grid, for example, because you might have a system at peak that could pump 10 out. And it's like, what are you going to do with that? If your batteries are full, the customers aren't using it, they then don't want to clip it, basically want the cake and eating it. It's if you've seen that and any things we can maybe advise consumers towards to kind of mitigate those losses, I suppose.
Yeah, I think it's all about finding, like a lot of things, it's finding that happy midpoint, really, where I have conversations, most days with people about what size system to get. If you're lucky enough to have a really large roof space, then it's a case of, yes, you can fill it. And like say, panel pricing are a fairly low period at the minute. I know you've had quite a bit of info over about them going back up and all this sort of stuff. But for the price of a brand new kettle, you can buy a solar panel, and it seems crazy that's that's the case. And so filling a roof is actually not as expensive as it was during the feed-in tariff era and everything else. So there's a sense there to, actually the scaffolding's going to cost the same. The labour is going to go up a little bit, but not much. If you've got optimizers, you've got a few more optimizers, a bit more rail, a bit more, all the different bits. So there is an increase in cost, but a big part of that cost is usually scaffolding, is usually, getting the actual team there to do the job. So actually adding some more panels is a really good way to increase the annual generation, but it's annual generation. And the sense is that having more panels in the wintertime is really beneficial, and it is, but it's the summertime when you've got that 20 kilowatts. Like Solar Edge, we do a lot of Solar Edge stuff. A lot of their domestic inverters are 200% oversizing. And you have, a 10 kilowatt single phase inverter with 20 kilowatt panels on it. It's got to do something with that during the summertime when, if you've got heat pumps maybe not running as much, you've only got a limited amount of battery storage, because batteries, they're not expensive as such, but they are kind of a good chunk of the cost of these systems. So people don't want to have 30, 40, 50 kilowatt hours of battery storage just because they've got a big solar PV system. So it's kind of, what do you do with that extra power? Because if your inverter can't handle it, then it's got to clip it and lose that through heat and all the magic it does to lose that extra energy. So, and that can cause issues when you apply for the DNO as in terms of like the export.
Yeah, I mean that's the crux of it, isn't it? Really, it's consumers accepting they have to put a bit of work into managing that system to get the extra out of it that they want, or to understand that it is just lost generation because they've sized the system to get a bit deeper into winter with a reasonable amount of generation. And it is difficult to have your cake and eat it on that basis. And again, if the DNOs are giving you a 6 kilowatt export limit, for example, and you're in summer and you've got that 20 kilowatt generation, but you've allowed your batteries to be full because you've charged them up overnight to try and sell as much power back to the grid as you can, and your EV's full because you've charged that overnight because it's out at work during the day. All that extra generation, you can be producing it, the inverter can maybe handle it, but you can't send it anywhere. So it clips it away, like you said, with the clever technology. And we get asked a lot, why don't the DNOs just let us send it all out to the grid? Because we're producing it, why not? And it's understanding that they want to allocate that space to other people, perhaps down the street, who haven't got solar yet, but maybe will want it in a few years, rather than giving it all to one individual. But also the cable out of your house can only handle a certain amount of power in any regard. And it could be that you're quite rural, and if you start pumping out lots of power into the grid, you can cause quite wide variation in the voltages. And we've got some big systems out there at the minute where the customer has only got, I think one of them's got an 8 kilowatt export limit, and they're charging up EVs, running heat pumps overnight, and none of that is really coming from any solar, it's coming from the grid. So the DNOs have got that aspect to worry about. And then during the day with these big arrays in winter, if they allow you to export all of that, you'll rise the voltage. You'll basically do a lot of this to their infrastructure, really cut the voltage down and then really bump it back up. And they're trying to manage that as best you can. And it's really quite tricky. But if you do make some changes yourself, you can still work with those bigger systems. Peak generation time, for example, if you set your car to go on charge, you can take a lot of that extra generation, up to 7 kilowatts, straight into your vehicle. If you let your batteries kind of hang at a reasonably empty level when you know it's going to be a sunny day, they can take a lot of that extra hit because it's all internal to your own infrastructure, and it's how you install and set that up. So it's difficult, and there is some examples out there on YouTube. We've had questions on one of ours with that big system about how we've set up to manage that, and really this is just a customer who absolutely hates energy providers and buying anything from them, and he wants to cover off winter. It's impossible in the UK, but he's blessed with lots of roof space.
Yeah, exactly. And I think part of this is also a symptom of the new way that energy's been sold. Because I know at my house we have I've got an EV, I've got solar, and I've got a battery, and I remember when batteries and solar PV systems were being sold for the whole self-consumption side of things. There was like a 5p export. That was it. That's all you get, 5p if you export it, but you're paying 21, 25, 26p, whatever it was, or even higher during kind of all the goings on that we've had over the past few years. And that was fine, and that probably worked better for the DNO because they knew that property has a solar PV system with a battery, which basically handles their export is probably going to be limited anyway because the battery is going to be taking it, and then their import is going to be limited during the evening time because their battery is then supplying their house. Happy days, DNO. The issue now is that you've got these disruptors and like Octopus have got probably the best range of tariffs out there. And for me at my house, we now charge our battery up from the grid every single night, as well as when the car needs it. We're charging it from the grid because I think it's 7.5p overnight, but we get paid 15 pence for anything we export. So every single night without fail, no matter what the weather's going to be like tomorrow, we charge that battery up to 100%. We then, that then covers us for the early morning period when the solar isn't generating enough to run, the toaster, the kettle, everything that we have on in the morning to get the kids sorted and ourselves. And then the battery then recharges during the day, ready from the solar to then power the home in the evening time. And then when it gets to the evening time, the battery runs the house, but I'm looking then at the app and thinking, I've still got like 30% in this battery. So then I force export to the grid. So the grid has had kind of like a double whammy where it's got this massive increase in import during the evening time because I'm charging the battery at 3.6 kilowatts. I'm charging the car at 7 kilowatts. And then we've got the dishwasher running as well. So we've timed that to run overnight, and the washing machine and all this other sort of stuff. We tried to stagger it so we're not going to blow the main fuse off the wall. But all of that stuff has got this massive increase in import during the evening time. But then during the day, where historically, like this better time of year that we're recording now, where it's starting to be really sunny, historically all of that extra solar power would have been, some of it would have been going back to the grid, but the majority of it would be going into a battery. Now, the amount going into the battery is tiny because we've maybe drained the battery during our morning period of 10, 15%. As soon as the solar has recharged that battery at 15%, all of that solar power is then going back to the grid. So then they've got this export during the day when unless you've got big factories in the area, that most people are out at work, and the local infrastructure is probably in low demand. And then in the evening time, we start forcibly exporting our battery because we'd rather buy the power in tomorrow or that evening. So the DNOs have, even over a period of like a year or two, have gone from this position of looking at solar generation and battery storage as like this eases the network, to suddenly, just because some tariffs have been released, to it being completely changed. We're actually now, to allow you to play the tariff, you're having to forcibly push power back to the grid to only 15p. And I bet the DNOs and all the network providers are like, what are we going to do with all this power? Because more people are getting it as well, and it exacerbates that problem.
It does. It makes it worse, not better, with every EV charger that's added down the street and every solar system that's added down the street. And we have some quite wide voltage swings down where I live. They sometimes drop down into the 220 volts, and in kind of May, June time, they'll be up there in the 250s. And that is entirely to do with renewables and lots of stuff running over winter, heat pumps and EV chargers. And that's the kind of thing the DNOs have to control. They are responsible for the supply of electricity to our homes, and there's defined limits. I think it's 216 volts to 253.
Something like that,
Something in that remit. And that's what they have to actually do. And they can adjust things by tapping their transformers up and down. But of course, if they tap it down because it's May and it's really sunny and there's lots of solar generation going on and people exporting full batteries, great, it'll work. But when they get back to winter and all of a sudden everyone's charging their batteries overnight, filling their EVs up, running the heat pumps, those voltages will drop because of demand, that, and it becomes a really difficult job for them. They can't be tapping up and down all the time. So how do you predict that? I think that's the next challenge we've got. And maybe as consumers, we need to accept that if we're sizing our systems to try and produce more in winter, that we can't expect to export all of that in summer. Yet try and change your lifestyle, make use of it as best you can, but you are going to be restricted to these because we see some really extreme examples. I say we've got one, and this customer has done it exactly because he's really upset with energy providers. But there's other examples out there, and it can really affect the voltages out in the grid and affect the way your system behaves because of that. If you push your voltage up, even within your own installation, it could be that you bumped it up to like 260 volts, but out in the grid it might be 250 still. That's sometimes enough to trigger your EV charging equipment into a fault state, and all of a sudden your car doesn't get charged up because you've affected the voltage on the network. Or the alternative, you dropped it too low and stuff starts saying, no, I'm not working. So you've got to kind of fit things, as you've said, with your customers, and then really get into their minds that this technology is brilliant. Yes, you've maybe got the roof space. Yes, you can afford it, but we're going to have to size your inverter and system capabilities to the point it's not going to start affecting the grid. And unless you play that game really aggressively, internal to yourself, you're going to lose a lot of that generation in summer. It's your cake and eat it scenario.
Yeah, and that's obviously why the DNOs have such a difficult decision, and probably why they don't get it always right in terms of what the grid can actually handle, because it must just be an absolute nightmare, because you're ultimately playing with a variable of the weather. Because if you have a cold, dull time, you're going to have high demand on your network. If you're in some sort of area where there's plenty of properties that have solar and a heat pump and everything, the demand is going to go through the roof because people are going to be heating their homes, but there's not the generation there to sort that, to kind of self-power that home through the solar because it's a dull time, or the battery hasn't charged during the day from the solar, so they're not able to power the heat pump from the battery partially, to the other extreme of it being really warm, really sunny, and then suddenly there's very low demand on the network because people aren't running their heat pumps, or even just other electrical appliances in the house because they're not cooking because it's so hot. All these other weird and wonderful things we all do in our homes depending on what the weather does. But we expect as installers, the DNO, to actually go, this is what you can have, and that will work forever like that. And maybe we just need to be a bit more forgiving to the DNOs to actually go, they've got a hell of a job to actually, because what you do now might be changed by what your next three neighbours do, because the DNO can't predict how your next 3 neighbours how they actually use their system. So, it's very, very tricky. And we're hoping to get someone from Northern Power Grid on. We're in the late discussions of that. So it'll be really good to pick all of that back up in another episode as well with this guy from Northern Power Grid to actually discuss how all that works. Because we moan about them all the time, don't we? How long they take and things. But I'm partially not surprised they take a while to consider it.
Yeah, this must be an absolute ball ache, for want of a better phrase, for them to get that ironed out. And that's really an interesting conversation I'm looking forward to on the podcast. And Jamie went into that in his episode as well. I think that's the really big topic that's rumbling away in the background behind all the technologies and the solar coaster and everything for the long-term mass adoption phase. That's the thing that needs to get sorted out. And just to say, if you're watching this, we have got a subscribers option now on Spotify, and as we're speaking today, Jamie's has just rolled out onto that. It's roughly 2 weeks ahead of schedule. It may change and vary a little bit, but if you're interested in that and you have access to Spotify, you can go off and subscribe. I think it's $2.99 a month, and you get the extra 2 episodes. Helps us with the podcast. Think of it as buying us a coffee or whatever, but we use it to make the show better and support the stuff we're doing more widely as well. So it's well worth going and digging into that. I think we've covered these topics quite widely, Sam, and we're kind of reaching the end of the time limit on it. Is there anything else you want to add around that before?
No, just a massive thanks to everyone for coming back and supporting the podcast. We get so many great messages both on our personal or our business Instagram side of things. It's really nice to see like a bit of a following for the podcast. Like me and Mark have always said, it's not about me and Mark at all. Like, we put the time in to do this because we're geeks. I think that's fair to say. We really like talking to each other about it. We still get on after like coming up like nearly a year.
That's a good point.
April?
It's a year on the 4th of April.
4th of April. So we're nearly 1 year old. And just thanks to everybody for watching and continuing to support the podcast. If you do want to get the next episodes, because some of the episodes do go on for a little while, so we split them into 2. So getting that subscription allows you to continue that conversation on straight away on those episodes that are split up. So doing that helps us with the podcast, but also allows you to keep the conversation rolling. But if you do have any questions about anything we spoke about today, or if you've got any suggestions on who you'd like to see or topics you'd like us to speak about, then drop them in the comments or drop us a message, and we basically add them to a list and get round to them as quickly as we can.
Yeah, I'd echo that. And we're getting some nice comments, both on Spotify, actually. There's a few people commenting on there and on the YouTube videos and across social media. It's really nice. We love that. This actual episode was kind of inspired by one of the comments on the YouTube episode we shared a few weeks ago. So we're listening, we're watching, we do want to keep talking about it. So do fire them in. If you've not already, don't forget to subscribe. We're edging towards 1,000 subscribers as well, which is pretty cool. We'd like to get over that line as soon as we can. And don't forget to give us a little comment or a thumbs up wherever you are watching or listening. Otherwise, we'll see you next time.